Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Are people with PTSD more likely to experience high strangeness? Are alien greys actually parasites? Are about dead people, or are they about dead people, or is it about time? Hello, and welcome to the 1017th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you from WOON AM and FM radio here in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live, on YouTube and TuneIn and TuneIn.com. I'm sorry, not TuneIn. That's no longer a thing. On YouTube. I'm Ben, and Paul is with us today as well, coming to us via Skype.
I'm quiet, but I'm here.
There he is. And with us today we have Michael Cameron, who grew up in the East End of London, but his childhood and teen years were far from average. He seemed to attract and concentrate paranormal energy, quantum entanglement, or whatever else you wish to call it. His early life was filled with paranormal entities and alien encounters, which later attracted the attention of governments. Last year, Michael was diagnosed with complex PTSD, and he has just published his first book, High Strangeness, A Lifetime of Alien and Paranormal Encounters.
Michael Cameron, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here, and thank you for inviting me on.
Well, it's great to have you. So I guess we'll just start off by jumping right into the deep end. So, Michael, this is the central question of your book. Why you?
Yeah, indeed. Why indeed?
So why you? What is your opinion? Why do you think all of this occurred?
Well, I think it's a combination of events, from being sensitive to various types of energies, but also I believe my mum was an abductee. She had her own experiences during the war and after the war, but it's something she never really spoke about. I grew up in a strict Irish Roman Catholic environment and family, and back in them times, the people never really spoke about anything like this. So it's very possible that this is one of the reasons why people are taken or become abductees from these otherworldly sources.
So what is the significance of, it's probably not a great way to start this question, but I already started, I guess. So what is the significance of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and how has that affected the experiences, or is it sort of a symptom of the experiences?
I think it's a reaction to them after the aftermath of the effects of this. I mean, when you're experiencing this type of phenomena, it's not so much about seeing spirits or seeing a UAP or lights in the sky. It's having a closer interaction with this type of phenomena, and also when it's much more more violent. Some of the experiences I had with these particular type of beings wasn't any way benevolent. It was sometimes bordering on torture. You're paralyzed, you can't move, you can't shout out. It's also the effects of no one believes you. So it's I experience flashbacks, I have nightmares, I cannot sleep, and I haven't done for years, decades, even with the lights off. It stays with you for the rest of your life. I mean, it's not something that you want. I mean, people say to me, "Oh, you should be lucky, Michael. You've been chosen, or you're special." But I always emphasize on each of my talks that I don't think I'm special. I don't believe I was chosen for anything in particular. other than the fact that, since I've been, 4 years old, having these interactions with these type of beings that I don't really want. I just don't want them. But you can't seem to stop them. There's nothing you can do to stop or, being taken.
Mm. So I guess that does kind of lead me to a question that was forming as you were speaking, which is, what I feel like we should probably get some examples out of the way first. So tell us a little bit about your experience, and then we can kind of, dissect it if you feel comfortable, sharing any of your experiences.
Yeah, sure. I mean, as I said in my book, I grew up in a school. I grew up in the grounds of a school, a junior school, which I attended with my brother Sean, who I mentioned. I'm the youngest of my brothers. I have 3 brothers, Francis, Kevin, and Sean. Sean's 2 years older than me. And I grew up in a schoolhouse within these grounds, which was a Roman Catholic school. My dad was the schoolkeeper. And in the book, my the narrative is focusing primarily on this location. This is where, from an early age, and as a teenager, that I experienced this various types of phenomenon. And one of the experiences I had at the time was during the summer holidays. With Sean, we were decided to go over into the school itself to, just have a game. It was the summer holidays, and my dad had been in the school with the Klingers, and he'd come home and have a bite to eat with my mum before returning to the school. But so me and Sean went into the school, and we were in the school in the hall. It's in the corridor, of the school, and we decided to play a game of hide and seek. So I went off to count. I went off to hide, and Sean went off to count. And on this particular occasion, it was he was counting, and he stopped suddenly, and I wasn't sure if he was trying to trick me, where I was trying to get me to come out sooner, and trying to find out where I was hiding. And I remember I'd eventually come out from where I was, and I see Sean standing close to what would be the secretary's office, just adjacent to the school library. And I walked over to him, and he was looking straight ahead through the doors, there were 2 swing doors that led into the school hall where, the gymnasium equipment was located. And there was a piano there, next to the gym cupboard. And I remember Sean looking and pointing and saying, what is it? What is that? And it was, when I looked, there was this strange looking creature just standing next to, the piano, just staring back at us. And at the time there was no reference to what this creature was. Because this was during the 1970s. There was no reference to anything like this, and for a moment, it, again, as I talk about in the book, a lot of the time when I have these experiences, we enter into an altered state of consciousness. What the investigative researcher, British researcher Jenny Randalls, often coined the Oz factor, where the immediate environment around you suddenly in some way changes. All sounds vanish, and there seems to be an alteration, to the environment around you. For a moment it seemed that we lost time, and it seemed when we were looking at this creature and it was looking back at us, something did change. There was it seems like we lost we lost where we were in that environment. Something happened, and when we eventually did come out from this altered state, as they call it, again, it seemed we were, there was this feeling of dread, feeling of being afraid, wanting to get away. This creature wasn't there no more. And, you know, it was that at that moment that we turned and ran back to, you know, we were going back to the house to tell our parents. But as I was explained in the book, there was a set of stairs that led down to 2 doors what would take us out of the school. But when we were running towards that staircase, our dad was coming back into the school. So a bit of time must have passed because, you know, when we went into the school, he'd just actually be coming out of the school and going home to have a bite to eat, you know, and I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have finished it within like a couple of minutes. And we met him anyway on the stairs, and it was Sean that spoke and said to him, you know, that there was somebody in the school hall, in the school itself, and, you know, and they wasn't human, you know, and I remember him looking at us, you know, to see if we were just messing with him, you know, just kidding. And he could obviously see that we wasn't, but we were frightened, that something had scared us, but he wasn't sure what it was. But he went off to investigate, and then he told us to wait there. And when he did return a little while later, he just told us that there was no windows broken, no windows being forced open. The doors were still locked from the inside, and he couldn't find anyone anywhere. So, you know, and what this creature looked like, it was very tall. It was a tall grey. You know, it had a big head, big black eyes. It had really long, spindly arms, you know, and legs. But it was really odd just to see this standing. It was surreal, really, standing in this particular location next to a piano. And, you know, I remember him telling us to go back home and just to, again, you know, just to play close to the house. I mean, his reaction wasn't, I guess, you know, what I'd think it would be at the time. And there was this particular theme with our parents, though, that when we were telling them things, it wasn't like they were, in a way, not so much shocked. It was almost like, you know, if I was looking back now, I would say they probably were familiar with it in some way.
Yeah, that's the impression I got from the book. And also you mentioned at least one abduction, probably more, where your brother Sean is sleeping in the room and he's oblivious. It's only happening to you. Are you the brother who had the most experiences?
As far as I'm aware, I am, yes. But as I say, as I explain as well, you know, I can't say with my hand on my heart if Sean went on to have other experiences because we're not very close. You know, and he never spoke about it. But it's possible that, you know, when he was acting up as a teenager and a young man, this could be PTSD. If these are experiences carried on for him, you know, if you can't talk about it, what do? You know, there are other ways, I suppose, of dealing with trauma.
Yeah, I guess that is true. I'm sorry,
Oh,
Dad.
bad, Ben. No, dude, can I ask, what's the very first experience you remember, Michael?
The first one was when I was 4 years old with Sean again. This was an experience we had together. We were out again. It was in the summer holidays in the school grounds. We were playing just on the green, which was just adjacent to the house where what would be the kitchen. We were playing, having a kick around with a football. You know, what would be, I guess, soccer. And we were playing football for a little while. And then Sean suggested we go off and, you know, have a walk around the school grounds. I mean, my dad, again, he was, you know, having a bite to eat. It was, you know, we went off and we walked down this grassy slope, which is in the school grounds. And we went and we walked again towards where this location was of the school hall, funny enough. And it was on the outside. It was actually on a raised platform. So there was a staircase, a stone staircase, and then a platform that went up to a second staircase. And I remember being down the bottom of the staircase, and I was actually kneeling down with my back to Sean because he went up onto the first platform, or the very first staircase. And I was actually looking at red fire ants, I remember, playing around with them with a stick. And I remember Sean calling over to me, and I turned around and I went to him, and he was pointing up at the sky. This was in a very busy weekday in London, so there was a lot in the actual area of the school itself. There was lots of warehouses that were, that were lots of activity going on in broad daylight, and there was also busy in the area of London where I was. It's one of the busiest police stations in London. It's still operational to this day, funny enough. But on this particular day, when he called me, I looked in the direction to what he was looking, and I could see, there was this strange-looking metallic object in the sky. It's what we would now call, a daylight disc, classical flying saucer. And it was just moving, silently but slowly in the sky. And it was gradually coming closer and closer to where we were actually standing looking at it. And again, we had this altered state of consciousness. That's why, as I describe it anyway. And, again, we had missing time. But when we come back from wherever we'd been, I was feeling confused, disorientated, and my heart was actually beating really fast, and I felt afraid. And Sean at the time, though, he hadn't come back from this. He was still in this trance-like state, and he was just staring at the sky. The object was no longer there. And I remember it was only when I called out to him, called his name several times, that he snapped out of this trance. And it was then that I basically decided to run for it. So I just wanted to get out of that location. I didn't want to be there. I just had a feeling that something had happened. I couldn't explain what it was. And when again we were running back to the schoolhouse, and whilst we were running, we were looking at the sky, to see if we could see, I guess, this object. I remember I was doing it. I remember when I was looking back at Sean, he was doing it too. So we wasn't communicating at that time. We were just looking, I guess, just out of, something you would do. And then we run into the house, and I remember we run through the kitchen door quite abruptly, and Dad told us off because we scared our mum because I wasn't expecting that. And then, Sean decided, to tell them what had happened, but their reaction was quite, I would say, unusual. In that, a lot of parents would say, "Oh, don't say that," or "Don't make that up," or "Don't be silly." But it wasn't like that. It was just almost they looked at each other. They didn't say nothing. They just looked at each other. But then Dad just told us, "Oh, it's nothing. Everything will be okay, and just go and play. Go back on the field and play football. We just stay close to the house where they can see us." But that was that. But it was much later on that Kevin, told me, as an adult, that these type of things were still spoken of by our parents, in the background, out of earshot of me and Sean, I guess. But as I explained, Francis and Kevin were a lot older than me and Sean. So there was a lot more said, I guess, in front of them than with me and Sean. But it's interesting that it was, it was spoken of. And the thing is, I never really spoke about it back then, but it was always something that I remembered. So when I wrote this book, I had these marker memories that was, so clear as though they were just happened yesterday. And I guess with the emotion and what had happened and my own thoughts and feelings on that, I was able to then create this, put this into a book and share it with you.
Now, there's a really interesting thing I wanted to bring up, which is there's evidence that your parents were experiencers as well. Yes. So what?
Yeah, that's right.
So what do you what kind of experiences do you think they had? Something similar to yours, or more along the paranormal side?
Well, I think my dad experienced. My dad was quite down to earth, nuts and bolts kind of guy. He had been in the military during World War II as a flight engineer in the Royal Air Force. And he every now and again he would tell me things. When I was growing up, he'd share a few things with me, and he'd say to me, that when he was in digs, before he met my mum in London, and he was staying somewhere, he would have paranormal activity where, as he described it, when he was asleep in bed, the bed covers were being pulled back off of him, and he would have a sighting of what he would say, is be a grey woman who would be standing in the bedroom, sometimes staring at him, and he seemed to encounter this particular female, ghost or spirit on several occasions. I mean, what I did describe in the book, what he did tell me is once when he was coming in from work or whatever he was doing then, and this woman had been at the top of the stairs staring at him and basically floated down towards him. I did say, it was quite interesting that she looked grey. Was dressed in grey, as he said. And, I don't know really what that was. I can only go by what he told me. But he did have another experience that in the school grounds, he was telling me once that up in where the nursery would have been, there was some gates there, and he was going to, at the end of the day, when the school had closed, he used to go around and make sure all the gates were locked. And I remember he said to me that he went to this particular gate, and there had been a Roman soldier standing there on guard duty, but it didn't seem to be, it didn't seem to notice that he was there. He was, it seemed like he was just playing that part, maybe from back a long time ago. And he said he just looked at this guard, and after a while it just disappeared. But take into account though that in the area of London I was born in, it's actually built on the Roman cemeteries. So up on one side, as from where my house was, if you walked say 10 to 15 minutes one way, you'd be in the Tower of London. And if you walked the other way, you'd be in the City of London. But in this area of London, it had a really rich, dark history. It was also the area, of Jack the Ripper, the infamous, would be, I guess, a serial killer. But in this, so with my mum, she described a time when she was evacuated to Hereford in the countryside during World War II, and she was staying in on the outside building, on her own. And she described an event once when she was, she'd woken up from her sleep. She felt something was wrong with the room she was in. She felt there was a presence there. And she said there was something that rose up from the rear of the bed. And, when I asked her what it looked like, she described it as being grey with, again, a large head, dark eyes. And, she was quite frightened. She didn't know what it was. And she put the covers over her head, like you do, thinking it's going to go away. And then she pulled them down, and it was still there. And then, she eventually went to sleep. Or she fell asleep. And when she woke up, it was morning, and she didn't know what it was. So I think she did have experiences, but I'm not sure what else she had. They, as I said, they didn't really speak about things much.
That is really interesting, and this might be something we'll bring up in the next portion of the hour, because we are coming up to our mid-show break. And there's a really interesting statistic that that parents who have any sort of traumatic event happen to them, it'll carry over to their children, and their children will also experience traumatic events. So if you experience something traumatic, there's a very high likelihood that your children will also experience something traumatic. Doesn't really matter what the event is; it's just something similar. Now you can make the argument that perhaps it's nature versus nurture. Perhaps it's the way you're raised, the patterns of behavior that you learned, etc. But nonetheless, it's not really like you learn to experience paranormal phenomena, right? Or maybe you do. I don't know. That's something that we're going to talk about in the next portion of the hour. So you're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you from WOON AM and FM radio here in Woonsocket's Blackstone River Valley. And we will be right back right after this.
Hi, everybody. This is Linda Tebow for Aging Well in Woonsocket, inviting you all to a fun and special way to help us with our work at the Gaston Ayard Junior Senior Center. Join us for dinner and laughter as the famous Charlie Hall presents his hilarious look at aging well called Aging Disgracefully. What's more, Aging Disgracefully is at 4:30 in the afternoon on a Friday, October 20th. No nighttime driving. Seating at the Senior Center Hall on Social Street is limited, so get your tickets today. Thanks to the generous financial support of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island, the tickets are only $30 for an afternoon of salad, dynamites, dessert, friends, and laughter you will never forget. Aging Disgracefully supports the health and wellness programs of Aging Well, Inc.
Local and live at 99.5 FM.
Hello and welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you from the WOON AM and FM radio here in Woonsocket's beautiful Blackstone River Valley here on this nice, crisp fall day. And so we're going to get right back to our guest, Michael Cameron. And we're talking about growing up with paranormal experiences, whether it's UFOs, UAPs, anything related to ghosts, whether it's ghostly Roman soldiers or something in the like. And now that we've kind of discussed a little bit about the background, I think it's important to kind of get into the why, the function. How does it affect you to this day? And there was one really interesting thing that I wanted to bring up, which is your event with Greys, right? So what convinced you that the Greys who took you were parasitical, and could you tell us a little bit about that event?
Well, I think it's because of the way they interact with you. As I say, a lot of the time, it's when they're coming to you and what they do to you. I mean, they're obviously not of good intent, because they come into you a lot of the time in the night time, when everyone's asleep. I guess it's when you're asking them to stop, they don't respond to you in a positive way. It seems they carry on with whatever they're doing. I mean, someone did ask me in another podcast, one of the hosts, did I think they were evil? Did I think that they were intentionally going out of their way to hurt me? And that's a good question as well, because some people and researchers describe the Greys as being in some ways being controlled by another race. So they're carrying out the duties or tasks of this other race. So in a way, almost like a robot. So they don't have any emotions, so may not respond in kind to anyone that's asking them to stop. They're just carrying out orders and getting on with that job. So I thought that was an interesting question, and it's obviously one that you have to take into consideration as well.
Well, there's another side of the coin too, which is I've brought this up to many a researcher in time, which is if these beings are entirely alien, right? That would mean they're nothing like us in any way, shape, or form, right? What's to say they have the same moral code or ethical structure that we do? because it's very easy to say, well, they're benevolent. Oh, they're they care about us. They want to help the environment. Why would they care? What would be why would they care about nuclear war? Why, if there's something completely other to us, how could we even understand their motives at all? And I think that's another side of the coin, because it's like, sure, yeah, they could be experimenting on you, but what's the point? What's the purpose? And I think that's a harder question to answer, in my opinion. What say you?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is very difficult. I mean, this is one of the biggie questions, I guess, with the alien abduction phenomenon. Why do they take particular people? For what purpose? We know that there seems to be a hybrid program going on, where they're taking babies, maybe creating a different race of beings that are very similar to us, maybe to infiltrate society. These are just opinions of other people, just thoughts. I think there's no real proof. But I think we're still looking for that answer to that question on why, what's the real reason behind all this. I don't think we know, and I don't think we're any nearer to getting that answer.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as well. And there's something we were talking a little bit about before the show, and it was this idea. I think a lot of the paranormal comes down to, doesn't matter what field it is. It's the subject-object problem at the end of the day. And we have an objective reality, and we're subjects that are experiencing that reality. And there's a third party up there somewhere that informs our experience of that objective reality. And
Sure.
there was something I wanted to bring up earlier. I wanted to get a kind of background with your experiences in there first before we really hopped into it, which is, and you kind of alluded to this a bit. What is your reaction to, say you're giving a talk, you're on a podcast, and someone says, well, they're trying to help you. What if it's a positive experience that you've had? When very obviously it's negative. You've experienced the effects of it for years. What is your reaction to saying, well, people have positive experiences?
It's true, though. I mean, I'm not going to say to you that people don't have positive experiences. I do believe they do have positive experiences, and I think if they do, that's really good. No one wants a negative one.
True.
But there's a difference between when something's being positive. If I'm sticking needles in your hand, and you're not having I don't think you're going to have a good experience from that, as opposed to some of these caressing your hand. I think it's the intentions and and obviously the feeling from what you're getting from that. If you're getting someone knocking on your door and introducing themselves to you, that may not necessarily be a bad experience, as opposed to somebody coming through the walls of your room or coming through the windows and then, paralyzing you and subjecting you to various sorts of, activities, for me, that border on torture, and burning your inside your mouth with a wand-like instrument while you're paralyzed. And, you can't shout out. I wouldn't consider that to be a positive experience. And I think, it's foolish for anyone to suggest that it is, unless you've had that experience yourself. I would say probably, try to be a little bit more intelligent about it.
Michael, in the book, you mentioned that you had invisible friends as a child.
Well,
Despite that, was that a positive experience, or did they turn out to be something else?
Well, it was my parents that could, that were, that believed I had invisible friends, I guess, to try to understand what it was, or reason what I was having at the time. I mean, when I was a child, I did have, there was a man and a woman that used to come to visit me. Sometimes they would just appear. And I didn't know what they were back then, but when I was much later on, I realized through classical, I guess, ufology, that the individuals that I see at the time were those that you would call Nordics, the Nordic types, the tall blondes, piercing blue eyes, and almost like body hugging uniforms, athletic builds. But these, but although I did have these, as in my book, there is a question mark, in a way, that I put across these type of experiences with these particular beings. I do know through, ufology, lots of people, especially contactees, that have had these type of experiences with these particular type of beings, often describe it as being positive experience. I would have to say for myself, it would be, I would say 50-50. I'm not sure if it was or not, only because, when I had these experiences after they'd left, I had again a feeling that something untoward had happened that may not have been so positive. I can't say consciously what that was. It's just an underlying feeling. I also had the fear of running away from where they had been in that location. I was very afraid, very frightened. And, I'm not sure if that could be because of not understanding something and being afraid of that, what you don't understand, or was there more to it than that? I mean, I did say as well, I had these particular beings first, and it was a little while later when they suddenly vanished that I started to have my encounters with the, what we call the Greys.
That's a very sensible answer. Go ahead, Ben.
So I want to bring up something because I had this discussion with a friend of mine recently because it's almost Halloween here, and so I was people were asking me questions or whatever where I was, and so I was kind of explaining my sort of theories and changes and nuances in my experiences over the years. And there was this really interesting point that came up that I was really considering. A few years back, my dad and I were supposed to assist a local, quote unquote, local, pop paranormal team, but my dad ended up bowing out last second, so I had to go. And I went, and I did the whole gambit, whatever. We don't usually work with people, I was just kind of doing my thing. And I was interviewing the homeowner in the case, and I was like, well, when did this all start, et cetera, et cetera. And it turned out she was having issues with one of her children, and the kid had barricaded himself, in a part of the house with his girlfriend, and they were doing all sorts of untoward things, and it was she was like, well, that's kind of when all this started, and I was like, well, unfortunately, it's like, getting rid of the ghost in your house isn't really going to do it. The problem is that it's like, I'm not a family counselor, and I made sure to tell her that up front. Like, look, I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not a counselor, but I think you should try and find one, because most of the problems are the people are haunted, not the places. Because it's typically at the risk of sounding like like this is all, psychological, right? Because it's not. We know that it affects the environment. We know that these things affect the world around us, but we're not, passive bystanders. We participate in the experience. And we participate in it by sort of what we bring to the experience is what we get out of it. And not to say it's anybody's fault that this is happening, right? Because you didn't ask for any of these things to happen to you. But there's sort of this link between ourselves and the experience, and especially if there's something traumatic there, or some sort of disorder, or some sort of dysfunctional thing happening there, that can sort of exacerbate the phenomena. Have you found that your experiences over time, things have kind of gotten escalated, or even dynamics with families, friends, and anything that's kind of escalated these experiences?
Well, it's. I think in the beginning, it's difficult to pinpoint that on. I know where you're coming from, what you're saying, but it's difficult to pinpoint that on if it's a baby or a child that's having interactions in this way, because there's no problems there, is there, in them times?
Well, unless
forward.
It's with the parents or other people around.
It's going forward, but with my experiences, my experiences have not been good, but at the same time, as you go through life, it's what you do with them, and how you in some ways transform that negativity and what you're feeling inside yourself. I wrote the book because it's very therapeutic. It was very helpful for me to process a lot of these emotions, which were difficult when I was writing the book. There's sometimes a lot of tears and a lot of this emotion coming up, writing the book helped me because, I think it would help many people that even, if they're writing it in a journal, to get these thoughts and these feelings out, and putting them down onto paper. But for me, it helped me. I had a difficult time with my dad when I was growing up. We were just different. But when I was writing the book, it helped me to process those emotions. It helped me to see him in different ways. The memory of him, he died when I was 15, coming into 16. He was very violent. For a long time, it was difficult dealing with that part of my life. I had a lot happen when he died, and I had two aunts that died, and my dog died, all in the same time period. And at the same time, I was having these really bizarre experiences that I didn't understand. That I didn't have anywhere to go with it. So, I mean, if at best, as I described in my book, what happened with the doctor, or even with the priests, So, but when I wrote this book, I was able to process it. I was able to start to heal myself, and I was able to forgive my dad for the experiences that I encountered with him. Going forward, it's trying to understand the phenomena, and trying to heal yourself through this. It doesn't, even though I've had negative experiences, it doesn't mean I have to, dive into the ditch, so to speak.
Well, Michael, tell us about the book, where people can get it.
Yeah, the book is available on Amazon. It's on paperback. It's on hardcover. It's on Kindle Unlimited, and it's now on an audio book. And it's available. It's available there.
Well, I gotta say it's very. It takes a lot to kind of put yourself out there and write a book about your experiences, especially something so hard. So I very, very brave, and I can really respect that. And
Thank you.
It's and it's true, a lot of these experiences are very personal, and they're very. It can be tough to express them because a lot of people just they weren't there, right? They didn't experience what you experienced, and it's very, yeah. And I think the personal reality of it is something that can be kind of missed in the paranormal. Usually it's like you get stuck on the, oh wow, they saw like a spooky lady in a hallway, and it's like, well, how did the person who experienced it deal with it? Because it does,
sure,
it does take years to kind of deal with these experiences. I mean, I know that firsthand. It's like, some stuff that happens, it's like, even if it is positive, right? There's, you use this word before to kind of. I'm going to butcher it because I can't remember the exact word you used, but it sounded like you were saying the word discernment almost of your experiences, kind of
Sure.
thinking about them in a way that you can kind of process it or analyze it a little bit better.
So along come Men in Black and government interest. In our last few minutes, can you say something about that, Mike?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when me and Sean experienced this particular entity or being in the school hall, it was only a little while after that. I myself, whilst I was alone in the house, my mum and dad and Sean had been in the garage, which was just adjacent to the house. They were laying tiles at the time. I was in the house alone. This was a wintry night, and when I was as I describe it, I had an encounter with one man in black. I didn't know who or what it was. I was, again, I was frightened, because there was nobody else in the house with me. All the doors were locked. I know the kitchen door was locked because I locked it myself. And so, this was an experience, first of all, I had. It wasn't the last time I would have encounters with these particular, MIBs. I did have one actually in 2017 in the United States, in New Mexico, when I was over there visiting. I had a black car following me, and eventually, when it did stop, and two MIB type individuals got out of the car and was watching me. This is something I will put in book 2. So yeah, I've had experiences with these, and I am, what would be described as a MILAB, which is a military abductee. This is something I will go on to speak about in a lot more detail on other podcasts, and in book 2, I'll talk more about my memories in regards to the military projects and programs. I haven't got all the answers, but I will certainly be talking more about them and what I've, began to piece together and what I've been told about some of the activities I've been involved with.
Okay, we have a question here from Jim, and I think we have just a minute to talk about it. Gee, Ben, I wish Ben, I'm going to put this in the chat, and you could read it. I'll never get through it. We can just take a second here.
Yes, sir. Let me take a gander here at the question whenever it comes in.
Stay free.
Yeah, I'm.
We do love taking
Here we
listener
go.
questions. And waiting for it. And for all those that can.
All right. Sorry to hold things up. There we go.
There we are. Lovely. Okay. Oh boy. If my mouse decides to cooperate. Here it is. So the question, the comment, which I believe starts with, there it is. Since his parents may have been abducted, it is possible that he made an agreement prior to his birth with the ETs to be abducted. If he is abducted again, he can tell them that he now rescinds any pre-incarnative agreement to be abducted. They would then have to return him, or else they would be violating his free will, which is a major violation on a universal level. Basically, they would love polarity if they violate someone's free will. Free will violations are the main reason that ETs don't land. They are both negative and positive entities who are in a thought war for Earth. The thought wars are fought through dreams, abductions, and telepathy. The positive ETs carry out a quiet campaign. The negative ETs are from the Orion star primarily, and he may or may not have had an agreement with them, but if he did, this this statement to them would work. Thanks for always putting on a good radio show.
Well, there you go, Michael.
Yeah, I understand that the information he's talking about doesn't work in regards to these type of projects and programs. The abduction phenomena is nothing new. It's not modern. It's been going on since biblical times. This is their playground, and they play in it regardless of the rules. They're not interested in natural law. I understand about natural law. It does work in what you're saying does work in some instances. The contracts, I do understand about the contracts. The contracts are not made with these particular beings. I have contacts and information from ascended type masters and angelic forces outside of the body. What they've told me is that these particular beings are a menace. They are breaking natural law. There are no agreements made between them prior to birth. But what you will find is sometimes I've been told with these particular abduction programs that the same type of individuals are re-abducted over and over and over again for centuries. The contracts we do have a contract with them, but it's not an agreed contract.
I do think that that's an interesting idea. I've actually never heard that before until today. I don't want to discount anyone's experience. As someone who has never experienced it before, right? That's just my first time hearing that, so it's a little new to me to be able to comment on it or even consider it.
But even though I'm saying that though, it's not written. It's not written. It may not be true. It's just what I've had from outside of the body. It's something to consider. But for myself, again, we need a lot more research to be done in this particular field rather than just saying, one thing or another. We need a lot more scientific evidence, to be able to make a proper decision or, have a bigger picture.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree with that because there's so much, there's so many narratives out there and subjective experiences that it's it's hard to catalog all of it and be able to kind of break down the data points.
I mean, we need more academics. We need more scientific people in the field, and
Agreed.
Because this is the only way we're going to get to the bottom of it. We got people like myself that have the experiences. I do research in the background as well, investigative research, but at the same time, we need a lot more professionals on board. This is the reason, why to make an informed decision, we need to have more evidence to study.
Yeah.
Very good. Michael, thank you so much. The sincerity of your book comes across on the air as well.
Thank you.
We will stay in touch, and best of luck with your work.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for your kind words.
Okay, Ben, take it away.
Yes, sir. So we have coming up the 2023 Western Connecticut UFO Conference that's presented by the Danbury Library. That will take place virtually and in person on October 27th to the 29th. Events will begin on this show next week, October 22nd, with special guests Reverend Michael Carter of Ancient Aliens and live audience interactions. Connections with the library will be via Zoom. Register at danburylibrary.org, and registration is free. And the Greater New England UFO/Bigfoot Conference is back. This will be a one-day event on November 19th at the Veterans Memorial Center in Leominster, Massachusetts. You can watch for more information on that. You can visit our show website as well. That's behindtheparanormal.com. where you can find nearly 1,200 hours of our regular shows and special broadcasts since 2008 from CBS Radio, Achieve Radio, and here on WOON AM and FM. You can also hear many of these broadcasts on the major podcast platforms, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. And you can download our show app. It's free at BehindTheParanormal.com. And you can browse our books, along with those of our guest co-hosts. Our website has a charity page as well, with links to several good causes that we've adopted over the years, including Hope for Hilldale Cemetery in Haverhill, Massachusetts, USA Cares, Canadian Veterans Advocacy, Helping Haiti's Orphans, the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America, and the Sisterhood of Ground Zero. And so next week, we have, that's October 22nd, as we mentioned, we'll simulcast with the Western Connecticut UFO Conference taking place at the Danbury, Connecticut Library with special guest Reverend Michael Carter of Ancient Aliens. And like I said, if you would like to register to be a part of this and ask questions of Reverend Michael Carter, you can register at danburylibrary.org. Again, registration is free. And we leave you with an interesting thought from American author Teal Swan. We do not fear the unknown. We fear what we think we know about the unknown. I'm Ben Eno.
I'm Paul Eno. Thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey. And we'll see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Broadcasting live and local daily from the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Studio